episode 3 of the food waste saga, which is this week, Eat What You Buy. So it's getting people, obviously, to, once they've bought the food, actually be sensible with it and eat it rather than chuck it in the bin. So last week we looked at buy what you eat, so planning your meals and using a shopping list. Like I said, this week it is eat what you buy. So it's things like making sure that you actually don't overcook food, that you don't do too many bowls of rice, too much pasta. Rice and pasta are obvious ones that everybody overcooks, which is why the spaghetti measurers and the rice measurer is always very handy. But it's making sure that people actually get the food that they'll eat and, don't give a child an adult's portion. And obviously from there, if you have got food left over or stuff in the fridge, it's using that the best way you can. Part of me doesn't like the expression lovely leftovers, because to a lot of people, leftovers, they think it's the scrapings on your plate. So what I've tended to try and do is use the term, food that hasn't otherwise been eaten, or, that food at the back of the fridge, just to try and let people know that actually it's not your, uneaten, piece of meat and a few fish bones. It's actually food that is a valuable resource and that you can actually use in other recipes. So some of the best tips, you can actually weigh or measure your food. I mean, it's obvious, particularly your rice and your spaghettis and your pastas and things like that. Make sure you actually know roughly how much per person you actually can serve. And if you've got a lot of people around a table, get them to serve themselves, so they actually only take what they need. It's a good way of, sort of being sociable as well with your food. I mean, Nigella Lawson, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but she's very much of the put stuff down on the middle of the table and everybody helps themselves. And that does add to the sociability, I think. But you don't need to be going out and buying, things or scales, but find out what, works for you and what is a rough measurement and use it. I mean, yes, we do. Like I said, we do use the spaghetti measurers a lot. We do obviously use the rice scoops a lot. I use the rice scoop a lot, and I use it for rice, couscous, all sorts of things, because it's a one scoop of that is quite a good portion of things. So, what are the perfect portions? As you can see, these are the right portion sizes. It's always a good game to have with people if you can, when you're doing events and things like that. I think Cyrus has mentioned it before. You have the bags of rice and you get people to guess. And I always used to do that. I'd have a big bowl of rice and a rice measurer and some spaghetti and say to people, right, you tell me how much you think is the average portion, and then you whisk out the spaghetti measure or the rice scoop and go, actually, it's this. And people were actually really, really surprised, particularly with the rice. As to what's actually happening. So another way of looking at this, which I stole from Stafford, is you've got your fist for your portion of fruit and veg and your pasta. Supposedly 2 fingers is a serving of cheese, but not in my house, that is. Maybe 4 fingers is a serving of cheese, and the meat and fish. So, if you haven't necessarily got the right measuring things, don't worry, people can, use other things to gauge how much they want. I mean, the other thing is, I always say to people when they go, oh no, I have twice that amount. It's like, great, fine. If you have that twice that amount, that's fine, as long as you eat it. It's when you just, have eyes bigger than your stomach, as my dad always used to say to me. Love Food Hate Waste website has got a very good portion calculator on it, particularly if you're starting to think about eventually cooking for more people. It's very useful. We always push this at Christmas so that people don't overcook Christmas lunch. And so it gives people an idea roughly of how much they need to cook, and I found that quite useful as well. So once you've actually bought your food and you've cooked it, and you've got stuff that you really haven't used in the fridge, what can you do with it? Well, you can use it to make other foods. The Love Food Hate Waste website's got some really good recipes. That's an example of one. The Boston bean pot. Yumly and BBC Good Food obviously have, Rob's going to go over about Yumly and some of these apps again. You can freeze them. Because I'm on my own when Caitlin's not at uni, I just do 2 portions and stick one in the fridge, and then if I don't eat it 2 or 3 days later, it goes in the freezer. And then sometimes I give it to my dad. If I've got enough left over, I'll do a portion for my dad who's on his own. And it's always a good idea to have, a good store cupboard, as they say, with your chopped tomatoes and rice and couscous and pasta and all those sort of things that you can use to just throw together to make a meal. I mean, you can look in the fridge and go, all right, I've got some chicken, and then mix it up and, make it into something with one of those. What you can also do is, if you've got a glut of fruit and veg, particularly if you grow your own, why not make jam or pickles? Very trendy again, and you could, if you've got enough, you could actually sell them. Although I'm not sure where the hygiene regulations are, but they make good presents for people as well, particularly if you're very good at making pickle and jam. You can put a pretty top on and give it as a present to someone. So that's a great way, and a very old-fashioned way, really, of preserving your fruit and veg, because that's what they used to do in the days before we all had fridges. One of the big campaigns that Love Food Hate Waste ran a couple of years ago is Completing, which is, it's basically getting people to think about other parts of the food that are perfectly edible but that we would automatically throw away. So it's things like the stems on your broccoli, potato peelings, the crusts on bread, even pizza crusts. Apparently people don't eat pizza crusts, and what it was saying was that actually you can eat those. Some of the best nutrition is in the green parts of your stems of your fruit and veg. So this campaign's quite a good one to point people to get them to think about potato peelings. My colleague at Witchaven had never even considered making potato peelings into like crisps until he looked at the Complete campaign, and it's really made him rethink actually a lot of what he does. He certainly now cuts up his broccoli stalks and things like that and feeds them to his son, and it's worked really well for him. So it's getting the best out of the food, completely eating it, and obviously getting the nutritional elements of it, and saving money, which is the whole point of Love Food Hate Waste. So obviously there's information on Complete on the website. And of course, we could share things. As it says there, 81% of us would be happy to receive food from a neighbour. But if you haven't got people you can share things with, you've got various options. We've got Olio, which is a very popular app. They've gone into other items, so they've almost become a food and non-food item sort of site, a bit like Free Cycle or something like that, so you can put up stuff locally, and that's become very, very popular. You've got Too Good To Go, which is the app that actually gives you access to food left over from restaurants and things, and Morrison's I think do their various baskets and boxes of food on it as well, but you can't get those for love nor money. As soon as they're available, they've gone. But it's again, if you want to eat sushi at 10 o'clock at night, it's a great way of getting some leftover food, but you have to pay for that. But it's a seriously reduced rate. And I think Pret do a lot of it as well. They get involved with Olio and Too Good To Go. And there's community fridges. If you've got food to share, obviously a community fridge is such a good way of sharing it. I think we've touched on community fridges before. We've only still got the one in Upton, but we are looking to extend, the number of community fridges across the county over the coming months. It's had to be put on hold because of everything that's going on at the moment. And that, I think, is it.
Thanks, Anna. I've got a very short one today. So the idea, I think, was we were all going to bring in a leftover recipe. So I thought I would link it back into Yumly that I did last week, and I'd give an example of very precise criteria of things I've got left over, and then find a recipe using Yumly. So I've just done screenshots really quickly, and then you can all share your recipes as well. Okay, so we're going to look at leftover food specifically. So I had to think about things. I did have a look in my fridge, and I haven't got that much left over, but there's certain things I always must admit I always have a little bit left over of. When you buy cream for a recipe, you rarely use all of it. Spinach tends in big bags, so there's a bit left over, and that doesn't last very long. We've talked before about how the package sort of items, so depending on where you shop, courgettes are one of those ones that you just generally, it's quite hard to get singles of, isn't it? So a pack of 2 or 3 is quite common. And it's similar with peppers. If you went to an Aldi or a Lidl, you'd probably struggle to get a single pepper if that's all you wanted. So I took those 4 basic ingredients and typed them into Yumly. I used the website version for this particular one. But I also, just to prove how good it is at finding recipes, put in a multitude of filters. So I put in gluten-free, which I am, and I put in vegan, which I'm not, but very often I'll try to eat a little bit more vegan.
My cat wants to come in.
I also put in a couple of ingredients that we generally avoid in the household. So my partner's terrible with tomatoes, so we avoid those. And my son just hates mushrooms, regardless of how we try to disguise them. So we avoided those. And I also put in things that take less than 15 minutes to prep, say you were in a rush. So even with all of those in there and those ingredients, I still got 14,793 recipes. Now, all those items wouldn't have been in all of those recipes, but they're sort of part of all of those. I mean, you can see at the top there, courgette and spinach salad. So I had a bit of a scroll through and I thought, well, probably I would have gone for something maybe like that. Caught my eye, the roasted summer vegetables and quinoa salad, I think that is. I can see straight away it's been favorited. It's been yummed 177 times. It's got a star rating on there from a couple of users as well who thought they liked it. So I think, okay, well, that's probably quite a good one. And then you can click onto the recipe and it says all the bits and pieces about the ingredients. So we didn't use all my ingredients, but I could have used my courgettes. I could have used my red pepper in there. And although it says basil leaves, I could have replaced the basil leaves with spinach. That probably would have worked absolutely fine as well. So I'm using up things I actually have, and I've searched for a recipe nice and quickly and easily. So that's all I wanted to say on that, just as an example. How do you want to do it, Em? Do you want to go round robin and go around everyone? Oh, sorry, off.
Well, I'll start as I should have set it. Well, the one that I like, many years ago, when I worked for Birmingham, I did some work with BRMB as it was then. And 2 of their presenters went to Andy Waters' restaurant in Brindley Place, and they'd emptied out their fridges. And the one recipe consists of chicken, bacon, chorizo, tomatoes, and a bit of beans. All that Andy did was made it into like a stew, and it was really, really good. And it's one of those things, because like Caitlin likes chorizo. How do you call it? Chorizo. And I'll buy it, but often, you'll have a few slices left over. So it's a great way of just throwing it all into a pan. And I still make it, and I still like it. And every so often, Andy and I will exchange tweets where I'm like, "Oh, I've made your stew again, Andy," and you'd be like, "Fab." So yeah, that's mine.
I don't really do recipes. I just throw everything in. Just question what's in the fridge. But I do like boiling up the bones from the chicken, as long as it's decent chicken, and just throwing in all basically I boil up lentils and the bones with lentils, and I boil the bones first. Then I do the lentils and then celery and tomatoes, liquidize that, and then just add any veg I've got. But there's all sorts of things. Basically, anything. You just go through what you've got left over and stir fry it with a bit of soya sauce or garlic or ginger. I'm not a very imaginative cook. It's whatever happens to be there goes in. And certainly, the other thing with leftover fruit, it goes into a crumble with me. Everything that right through the year. At the moment, we're having black currant and raspberry crumbles and tably crumbles. And then later on, it'll be red currant crumbles, and although red currants is nice, it's good in ice cream. Then of course it comes out the blackberries come, so it's blackberry and apple, and it just goes on gooseberry crumble, depending on what there is. You can put anything in a crumble.
That's the way it should be, isn't it? I mean, that's how people used to cook, isn't it? They cooked with what they had, and unfortunately, we've come to this society at the moment where we always want to be treated, want something different on that night. We wouldn't have two things that's similar, and so we are. That's one of the reasons why we waste so much.
Yeah, I think we don't tend to have recipes as such for leftovers, but what we do, I think, is like I think your first slide. We tend to plan for the week ahead. And so every night when we come to knock one off, we look at dinner. I look in either the fridge or the freezer and see what there is that we should be using up next. So it is using the leftovers, but it's like I look in the freezer and say, we bought these sausages ages ago, we bought this mince, and then we'll think, all right, let's have mince and potatoes. But then the next day we'll have like mince and onion pie, or we'll have a chili, or we'll have a bolognese. So we just try and plan. So we very rarely have anything left over, I think. The only thing we ever have, which goes against again what you said at the beginning, Emma, when we have people around for dinner, I don't want them to go home and think they were hungry. So I would say we overcook, and I always keep all the potatoes, vegetables, and make like vegetable cakes and shove them in the freezer just to fry up with sausages. So that's about the only thing that we ever have left over, really, mashed potato and veg, and we just put wherever's on the table goes into this big dish, and we gently mush it up, and then just put them in the freezer in little fish cake sizes. I never think all the leftover recipes you always seem to have to buy such a lot that I think it wasn't really a leftover by the time you finished.
I do that. I make up like a batch of mince and onion and tomatoes, and then it can be used for a chili or for spaghetti bolognese or whatever. It's quite a good idea. We have a
courgette left, because they're not the most popular vegetable. I will very often just blend it and then put it in the gravy, and nobody knows there's a courgette in there just to get rid of it. So, and you don't have to thicken them so much then. So blended things are good for people who don't like things. But that's me, I think, really.
That's very good, thank you.
For children, that's one thing you do, because they're so finicky. You have to disguise everything, and like doing that, blending it, they don't know they're getting it, do they? And my daughter wouldn't eat meat, so I tended to boil up bones, and then as a stop, and she didn't know she was eating meat, but she was.
I don't think it's not just children. My other half doesn't like courgettes, so they get blended up. So they don't know they're eating them, so don't worry.
I think there's more to do with the culture of I suppose of Britain, basically, is the fact of putting dinners out on a plate and plating a dinner out for people. I think that's why I've realised the last sort of few years now, I tend to put it out on a dish sort of thing, put the potatoes, the veg, and this and that, everything on a separate plate. So when the family comes or the kids come, especially with the kids, they take exactly what they want, and you just sort of tell them, take what you want, and then you haven't forced them, because otherwise in the past what we've done is you give them more, and they said, I'm full up now, and that's what we can do. And even for us now, just the two of us, we tend to put it out on a dish. I know it's extra washing up, but it's generally, the society, you go to people's houses and you're plated up a dinner, basically. Most families plate up a dinner.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because, if you think, when people have left something on their plate, that really annoys me, because you don't really want to use that in a leftover when it's been on somebody's plate. Whereas if it's not been touched and it's in a dish, then you're quite happy to use it to recook it. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and from my perspective, that would make a difference as well. From my allergy perspective, because I'm the only person with a gluten-free intolerance. So if it was mixed on someone's plate, I literally couldn't eat their leftovers on another day. Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, well, there's kind of two sorts of leftovers, isn't there? It's like stuff that's cooked and hasn't been kind of, and there's cooked stuff left over. And I think the good one for that is a good old bubble and squeak, isn't it? Fry some onions up and stir it in and heat it all up. And it's kind of really my wife, who's more the cook, and her mum as well, because we share a house with her mum, and they kind of I don't get to do a lot of cooking because they both like cooking and they cook together a lot of the time. But I mean, like bubble and squeak, that's something I do. But like my wife she always likes to kind of embellish things. So with bubble and squeak, what she would do is she'd grate some cheese on the top of it. In our house, it'd be, because we're vegans, it would be vegan cheese, and grate maybe some wholemeal bread on top of that, and keep it in the same frying pan, pop it under the grill, and just brown that off on top, and it adds a bit more. And then can have that with that's lovely with crusty bread, bubble and squeak. But with the kind of if it's like uncooked leftovers, like we often have, because we get like vegetables from a organic box scheme, and there's bits and pieces of stuff up to the left, a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of the other. And what my wife does with that, she'll do a ratatouille with it, because we always make sure we've got tins of tomatoes, and she'll make that into a ratatouille. Maybe some. Let me just look. She's been telling me what she does. Stick stock cube in it, some herbs. She sometimes puts orange juice in it. I know there's somebody said the other week about there was a recipe with oranges and they spoiled the recipe. But my wife does put orange juice. She's put orange juice in soup. Like, for instance, like a pumpkin soup, stuff like that. She put a little bit of orange juice in it. It does make it nice. And then that would be obviously ratatouille. Use yogurt. We put the vegan yogurt in that, and that can be cayenne pepper, and you can have that over some rice or even baked potato. So that's kind of, we often will do that, or cooking together. My wife and my mum-in-law will do like a ratatouille with the stuff that's the uncooked stuff that's.
Helen, would you like to go next?
Well, I've been experimenting with not wasting anything with the vegetables, particularly, and so they get served up all sorts of things like beetroot leaves, which I didn't realise you could use before. And I thought, well, why do I throw carrot tops away? And actually they've got a really strong flavour. You have to be a bit careful on them, but you can use them. Don't feed them to sheep though. Well, I know I've got a friend who actually does feed carrots to sheep with the tops on, so when they've got lambs, so they teach the lambs not to eat the tops. There is something in it anyway. Okay, here, so apparently humans can eat them.
Are they toxic to sheep, the carrot tops?
I think so, yeah, that's what my friend said, yeah. So we had leftover radishes recently, and people are not very good at eating. Well, they were a bit grubby, to be quite honest. They had visitors, and so I chopped them all up. And I thought, I'm going to do these. So I thought, okay, other people have been saying, well, they just throw it into things. Well, I just threw it into a pan and was cooking things. Which got me thinking, well, what else can you cook that you don't normally? You think of it's just a salad thing. And we've got absolutely loads of lettuce coming up in the garden all at once. People are really slow at eating lettuce leaves. They maybe have one or two on their plate. Well, you can even eat more if you chop it up into sort of slices, if it's that sort of lettuce. But also, I tried cooking those, and they work perfectly well as greens. Put them in the last minute, and they just wilt just like that. But also, I tried putting lettuce leaves into blender, and concocted, or I put in oil and lemon juice and spices and things, and made like you could use it as a dip, or we used it as pasta sauce. That worked really well. So using it raw as well. But again, you compacted a massive lettuce into sort of that much liquid, and it did good. Whereas it's a week to eat just a salad.
Really good. Thank you, Helen. That was great.
I actually chopped it, use the cabbage and cook it with some spices, turmeric and garlic and ginger. And you wouldn't know. You don't keep it as a stalk, and just chop it up and grate it or whatever it is you want to do. And cauliflower leaves taste great. It's the stalks of broccoli I struggle with because sometimes they're so thick.
Mm.
If you cut off on the stalk of broccoli, if you cut off the hard bit round the outside, it leaves you with this lovely crunchy centre that you can eat raw. And I love eating that raw. You can dip it in a bit of hummus, just eat it as it is, and that's like really nice.
Some of them,
Yeah. And the cauliflower leaves. I mean, when we cook cauli, we just cook the leaves as well and just eat the leaves at the same time.
I suppose you can just take the stalky bit out.
Yeah,
cut it out like you would say with cabbage. But yeah, I don't really eat cauliflower that often because I'm the only one that would eat cauliflower, and I'm not going to buy a whole cauliflower for me. I like cauliflower cheese, but not that much.
Raw cauliflower dipped in hummus is lovely.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
I prefer cauliflower. I prefer my veggies raw, to be honest with you. Caitlin used to be like that. She'd have a plate full of raw veg because I'd much rather have it raw than cooked.
Even Brussels sprouts raw, actually.
Oh, yeah. Everything. The only veg I don't eat is broad beans. But I'll happily eat raw veg.
There's something in broad beans. I was told there's something in them you shouldn't eat them raw. I think I can't remember, but I don't like them anyway.
The other thing that you've got to really cook up is are the chili beans, aren't they? You've got to make sure you cook them. You cook them properly because they've got some kind of a toxin in.
Oh, kidney beans! If they're
kidney beans,
you have to soak them, don't you?
Yeah, cook them. Yeah.
If they're the dried ones, you have to soak them overnight and then cook them up. But I buy a tin. I'm not that. Yeah. I'm not tired to soak veg. Come on.
In fact, there's something about runner bean seed is also apparently you shouldn't eat it raw.
Oh, really? I love runner beans, raw runner beans.
When they have a big bean in it.
Oh well.
What I used to do when I years and years ago when I.
So has anybody else got any? Nina, have you got any?
Can I pick up on a couple of things first?
Yeah.
Firstly, broad beans. People who don't like broad beans nearly always haven't had them fresh from the garden. Because what happens with broad beans is like sweet corn. The sugars turn to starch, and with broad beans, they go bitter. But if you ever get a chance to eat broad beans freshly picked from the garden, and you can eat the beans raw, give them a try, because they're a different animal to what you buy in the shops that have been sat around travelling for goodness.
Or a different vegetable.
Even one of them.
Vegetable.
But to me, they're a different animal. Just picking up on Helen and lettuce, because I grow a lot of my own vegetables. Every now and again, I do get a lettuce glut, and there is a fabulous recipe for lettuce and nutmeg soup, and it's a cold summer soup. And all you need is a decent stock. Lots of lettuce and nutmeg, but I didn't look up that one because I didn't think about it. The recipe I thought of, because I don't really deal in leftovers, but I do deal in gluts. If I get a glut of tomatoes, I make tomato and red lentil soup, and you just need. I use about 8 ounces of lentils to 16 ounces of tomatoes, and you chop them. Sweat an onion in some oil, and then you put the red lentils in that just to cook them. Then you bung in the tomatoes and the stock, and you simmer until everything's cooked. Then you season and add lemon juice, and then if you've managed to grow some, because it's dead easy, garnish it with basil. And I have to tell you, it's one of my favourite soups.
Sounds nice.
You blend it. Sorry, I missed out the blending. And you blend it all when everything's cooked. So that's my recipe.
Thanks, Nina.
Just going back to cauliflower. Cauliflower never really impressed me as a vegetable very much. But I said it was the Riverford people were doing some sort of how to use all vegetables, which I thought was a really good idea. And one of the things they said was just chop slices of the cauliflower, the whole cauliflower. So you've got a cauliflower steak, and put it on a tin with some oil and whatever garnish seasoning you want, and cook it in the oven. We tried it. It was really nice. Really nice.
That's nice. Yeah, because I like roasted veg, oven roasted veg, but I hadn't thought about cauliflower yet.
No.
Jamie Oliver has done that steaks of cauliflower. He slices them up like that.